Hey guys! Today's story is about the moon. And my t-shirt is about how to kill a mockingbird. See? The cat is reading the book, How to Kill a Mockingbird. Anyways, today's story is about the moon. I found this awesome book called Margret and the Moon through the Santa Cruz Public Library. See, they always put theirs in the front. And the Watsonville Public Library always puts their barcodes in the back. And at Mar Vista, ours are all over the place from every different librarian we've had over the years. Anyways, so that's an easy way to know. But Margret and the Moon. So I found this book, which is so awesome, and I'm so excited to share with you because I love this illustrator, Lucy Neasley. Now, Lucy Neasley wrote other books, adult books, that I read, and then I looked her up and I found she had illustrated a bunch of kids' books as well. So I read her book, Kid Gloves, and I read her other book called Relish. It's a graphic novel for adults. Now, Relish would totally be appropriate for kids too. It's about her life in the kitchen and her journey with food. It's awesome. Her mom was a chef, or is a chef. And I also read her book, Something New. And I was like trying to find every single one of her books. So I got in the library and online. I found her other book, The Age of License. These are all for adults, by the way. But anyway, she's done so many. She's included in this nursery rhyme comic book. But when I was finding her, I found that she had illustrated this book. Thank you, Lucy. For this author, Dean Robbins. It's called Margret and the Moon, How Margaret Hamilton Saved the First Lunar Landing. I love the art. I like her simplicity. I just love what she does. She has some new books that are out for kids, younger stuff, and some comics that I think parents would love. So look her up. Her stuff is cool, and there's a lot coming out from her recently. But today we're going to hear Margret and the Moon. How Margaret Hamilton Saved the First Lunar Landing. Okay. By Dean Robbins, illustrated by Lucy Neasley. And let's see, the illustrations in this book were created using ink and paper and colored in Adobe Photoshop. Margaret Hamilton loved to solve problems. She came up with ideas no one had ever thought of before. Thanks, Margaret Hamilton. She seemed to really like math. Why were there only daddy long legs? Margaret had a solution. She would call some of them mommy long legs too. Why didn't girls play baseball? Margaret had a solution. She would join the team herself. Why didn't more girls grow up to be doctors or scientists or anything else they wanted? Margaret had a solution. She would study hard in every subject at school. Now, Margaret grew up some time ago when it wasn't as common to see women as doctors and scientists and, judges or in baseball. And we see that more now, but we're still seeing more and more and more. Pardon me. Reading, music, art. She learned as much as she could about addition and subtraction, multiplication, and division. Margaret's father was a poet and a philosopher who talked to her about the universe. She asked about how the planets move when the galaxies formed and why the stars shone. Keep asking those questions. Stay curious, kids, just like Margaret. Oh, I love this picture. It has all these constellations. Constellations are all labeled anyways in some of the stars. She gazed at the night sky in wonder. So creative. How many miles to the moon? 238,855. How many miles does it travel around the earth? 1,423,000. How fast does it go? 2,288 miles per hour. How big around is it? 6,383 miles. Margaret began solving harder and harder math problems. It was fun working her way through the steps. She liked moving around the X's and Y's in algebra. She liked measuring circles and triangles in geometry. She liked studying curves in calculus. And then she discovered computers. Look how big computers were when Margaret was a young woman. So big. They took up like an entire room. Now you're probably watching this on a computer that fits in your lap. It's like your computer is like literally the size of this book. How weird is that? Margaret could use this new invention to answer so many questions about the universe. She experimented with writing instructions or code, like how you practice coding, or code that told the machine what to do. The code was called software, and Margaret called herself a software engineer. She started with something simple, asking the computer to add and subtract, multiply, and divide. You may have experimented with some of the coding games that are listed on our PVUSD school website. If you haven't checked those out, check them out. You can get to them as well through our Mar Vista school webpage. So if you're interested in coding like Margaret did, there's all kinds of cool kids games to practice that. Margaret taught herself to write code that performed more and more complicated tasks. She programmed computers to track airplanes through the clouds and even to predict the weather. She made them do things they had never done before. Amazing. Margaret thought of everything that could happen on a trip to the moon. Would the spacecraft go off course? Would it lose power? Would an astronaut make a mistake? Margaret wrote code to tell computers how to solve these problems. She worked her way through the steps just as she used to do in math class. She worked her way through. They actually used the real image from some of her work in that thought bubble coming out of her work. That's pretty awesome. Soon Margaret became director of software programming for NASA's Project Apollo, leading dozens of scientists. She helped Apollo 8 orbit the moon 10 times. She helped Apollo 9 connect 2 ships in space. She helped Apollo 10 get within 9 miles of the moon's surface. Hello there. Getting closer to the moon. With Apollo 11, NASA would finally try to put people on the moon. Had Margaret thought of everything that could go wrong with a lunar landing? She checked her code again to make sure. The astronauts were depending on her. Here's Margaret's code, literally. That's so much paper. I think she worked really hard on that. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lift off! Apollo 11 rose with a blast of smoke and fire. Margaret followed along from a control room, and the whole world watched on television. Now, there's a really cool virtual field trip. If you haven't checked those out, if you do the Spring to Reading Santa Cruz Public Library, there's some good links to virtual field trips, and there's just a bunch floating out there on Facebook and on the web. Just type in virtual field trips. There's an awesome YouTube with a kid and his dad, and they go check out these old spaceships. Hazel and I watched some of them. They were amazing. Just how big they were to see them go up to see these old spaceships. So I highly recommend a couple YouTube videos on that. Check it out, virtual field trips. For 4 days, the spacecraft drew nearer to the moon. The lunar module named the Eagle split off to make a landing. Yippee! There it is. But with minutes left to go, an astronaut entered a command and the master alarm buzzed. The Eagle's computer started performing too many tasks. Overload, yikes! It's like when our computers at school freeze, or they have too many windows open and they get slammed, or they just won't load. The control room panicked. The moon landing was in danger. Everyone looked at Margaret. Had she prepared for this problem? Of course! Margaret's code made the computer ignore the extra tasks and focus on the landing. It brought the Eagle closer to the moon's surface. Closer, closer. Touchdown! She fixed the problem. The Eagle has landed, announced astronaut Neil Armstrong. Control room cheered, and Margret was a hero. Later that night, the Eagle's hatch opened. Margret held her breath, and Armstrong took the first step on the moon. The whole world celebrated in front of their televisions. Hooray, hurrah, 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 hola, hurrah. I guess that's how you say hurrah or hooray in a lot of different languages. Love it. Margret walked outside, smiling. Her code had helped the astronauts get to the moon, and she knew it would help them get home safely. As always, she gazed at the night sky in wonder. And that's the end. Now, there's some really cool other stuff here. I'm not going to read you the whole author's note, but I will show you the pictures of the real Margret. Here's Margret with her code that picture was based off of. Remember that picture where she's standing next to this? Oh, perfect. I turned right to the right page. This one. Look. It's just like that picture. And here she is, Margret in costume when she was a little girl. Oops, sorry about the glare, you guys. And here's Margret at MIT. That's the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It's a really famous college for its math and science. You can check it out. They have a bunch of online classes for free. So I highly recommend checking that out too. Margret in an Apollo command module. She's doing some work. And then Margret as a child, right? She's a real person. Isn't that amazing? So I hope you enjoyed today's book. She gazed at the night sky in wonder. Today's book, Margret in the Moon. And check out some more books this way. Just like I did, you guys. I found this illustrator I loved because I loved her graphic novels. And it was so cool to discover that. So if you have an author you love, look them up through the public library or through our library, and you can still get on there through our Mar Vista School webpage. If you go to the library and go down, you can get on Destiny and search our book collection and see if there's other authors or there's other books by authors that you love. Okay, so I encourage you to do that and check in with me if you're needing help finding new books. I'm happy to help you guys. All right, I will see you soon, and I miss you, and I love you, and I can't wait to see you again. I hope you get out tonight and check out the moon and think about our friend Margret Hamilton and all she's done for us to help us explore the moon. Thanks for joining me for story time today. Bye, friends.